Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're gonna try to put together a $500 PC, and we're just gonna do the tower today. We're not gonna do anything else, just the tower, and I'll probably include, $10 for an operating system. But $500, and we're gonna see what early 2019 gives us for that price point. So let's check it out. Okay, so the website, and if you're a longtime viewer, you know this, but the website that I like to use here is PC Part Picker, and I like to start with kind of the platform for the system because CPUs, as long as you're getting a solid one, you're gonna be able to game with it just fine, especially because we almost always, with the builds that I do, put in a dedicated graphics card. So I'm gonna go to CPU, and I have a hard time not recommending AMD right now. If you're an Intel fan, you can absolutely fit solid Intel processors in. It's just that there's a bit of a shortage of the desktop Intel parts, which have resulted really in higher prices than really should be. I haven't looked recently, but let's see what an i5-8400 goes for. So actually the 8400 isn't far off where it should be from the MSRP. It's a little bit high, but 193 is not bad. Still, I'm gonna roll with the AMD because I know I can get a really awesome processor that's gonna be just fine for gaming for a very long time. So I'm actually gonna get rid of that. And let's check out what AMD has to offer. So in the past, I've actually picked the Ryzen 5 1600 over the 2600 because the prices used to be pretty far apart, but right now you can actually find the 1600 for just about, looks like $6 cheaper than the 2600. So at that point, you're actually getting better performance with the 2600 because you are gonna see higher clock speeds and less power consumption at the same clock speeds. So if you're running both of them at 3.9 gigahertz, you're gonna see a slightly better performing chip with the 2600. There was a very small IPC gain between the first gen and the second gen, but also you're gonna see less power draw if they are running at the same clock speed. And then down the road, if you add an aftermarket cooler, because we're not gonna get a cooler, at least probably not going to add an aftermarket cooler, because the stock cooler at stock speeds will keep this chip plenty cool. But if you do add one of those later on, you can see clocks up to 4.2 gigahertz if you get a really solid cooler. So the 2600, for my money, $6, I would say it's worth it to get the newer technology here. Like I said, we're going to skip the CPU cooler altogether. We're going to go straight into the motherboard. And one of the things that I like about PC Part Picker is it automatically, once you start picking components, it starts weeding out the parts that are incompatible with what you've selected. So right now we're looking at just motherboards that are compatible with a Ryzen 5 2600. I'm going to go ahead and sort by price, and what I'm going to be looking for here is a motherboard, and I always recommend this with lower cost systems. In terms of maintaining upgradability, I'm looking for a motherboard, B350, B450, X370, X470, so I want to maintain overclocking capabilities, but I also want to make sure that I have at least, well, really, there's no more, so 4 RAM DIMMs in the motherboard, and that's because I'm probably going to go with a kit of 8 gigabytes of RAM, a 2x4 kit, but having 4 slots then allows me to add more RAM later without having to outright replace the original RAM and thereby not wasting as much money in the long term. So that's what we're looking for here. And now that we're going to throw out the A320s because those do not support overclocking. So I'm going to select only B350, 450, X370, X470. And RAM slots, I'm going to limit to 4. So hopefully that does a good job of showing us what we're working with here. We have a ATX motherboard here. This one's from ASRock. We have a Gigabyte one. I avoid BIOStar at all costs because their BIOS are trash, at least in my experience. And we're going to look at this ASRock X370 board as well. And actually, we're going to look at this B450 board. And this B450 board. So I got several of these cheaper options sort of picked. And now I'm going to be looking for things like how's the board's cooling on the VRMs look? What's the layout here? This one looks okay. And see, I'm going to kind of avoid this type of board where we don't have any sort of heat sinks across some of these VRMs. There's one small heatsink here. I don't know how good of a job that's going to do, but if we're trying to maintain some overclocking, then we're going to want a beefier heatsink if possible than this particular board provides. And at this point, I've kind of limited myself down to these ASRock boards because they have beefier heatsinks on those VRMs. So I would expect that keeping those cooler, you might have better stability and overclocking, which is what I want. The other thing that I actually really like about this particular motherboard's layout is that we have an M.2 slot over here, so we could have an NVMe drive that is nice and out of the way, but we also then have, actually we have a pair of those. There's one that's right above the X16 PCIe 3 slot. And the other thing that I like here, though, is that this PCIe by 1 slot, which is a slot that you might occupy with anything from like a capture card, a wireless network card, you know, things like that. But it is above the PCIe slot, which means that a graphics card won't interfere with it. So good job, ASRock, there. And by the way, with that point, it looks like all these boards have that sort of same layout idea, which is just good management on ASRock's part. Now, this next bit is completely a design decision on my part here, but I'm gonna actually pick one of these MATX boards, these micro ATX boards, because micro ATX cases tend to be a little bit cheaper than ATX cases. So I'm actually gonna go with, doesn't really make a big difference. Looks like they're virtually identical layouts. So I'm going to pick whichever one is the cheaper option here. And that, by the way, ends up being the B450M Pro 4, so we're going to add that. Now that we picked the motherboard, we're going to go into memory, and memory is pretty straightforward for me. The thing that I sort of set as my standard for my RAM, because I think it's really good speed to price ratio, is sort of that DDR4 3000 and 3200 range, where if you're getting faster than 3200, you're typically starting to pay quite a bit more. But the 3000 and 3200, you're also not paying much more than some slightly slower speeds. So that's sort of the range that I look for in my RAM. And then we're going to sort it by price, and we're going to be looking for a 2x4 kit here, with the idea being that down the road, you can then upgrade your system with more RAM, because we do have those extra 2 DIMMs that we aren't going to be using right now. And I'm actually going to be going here with the second cheapest kit, and that's this Team Vulcan kit. And it's just because it is a gray and black kit, whereas these other 2 ones that flank it, both the one below, as well as this Patriot Viper 4, those feature red accents. And I'm trying to keep a neutral color scheme here. And for a sacrifice of about less than $1, actually, I'm willing to make that trade-off for a slightly more aesthetically pleasing build. Okay, so right now we are actually up to almost $300. So we may have to revisit something like the CPU, for instance, down the road as we start getting closer to that $500 price. Hopefully not, but we'll see what we can do here. Now for my storage, I definitely want some larger amount of storage. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to fit an SSD into this build, and I'll probably swing back to storage if I have about $20 extra at the end. But right now I have it sorted by capacity at 960 gigabytes as my minimum, because really I'm looking at 1 terabyte drives. And I've sorted by 7200 RPM because I want at least a fast hard drive, because hard drives are very cheap in general. And if I'm going to be getting a hard drive, at least I can be getting a faster one. And it looks like this Hitachi A7K2000 is going to be the winner. It doesn't have great ratings on Amazon, but because this is a gaming build, I'm sort of going to take a gamble here to save a little bit of money. However, if that makes you nervous, for just a few more dollars, you can get a Western Digital drive. But the reason I want to take this gamble is, as a gaming computer, I have cloud save on pretty much every game I play, and if there's a random game that I play that I don't have cloud save on, I can always just drag and drop that save file onto something like Google Drive to back it up occasionally. Because if this hard drive fails, it's not going to be a big deal to replace the hard drive and move on. Okay, now for the moment, I'm going to skip the video card because I want that kind of to be the last bit in this build. Just so I kind of know my exact budget for the video card, I'm going to actually skip over to the case and just sort by, you know, the cheapest case out there. And what I'm looking for here is a cheap case. I don't care if it's hard to build in, because once the parts are in the case, it's fine. What I'm really looking for here is a case with good airflow. Okay, and unfortunately, usually these Rosewell cases are extremely cheap. The problem here is that I have personally built in this particular case, and while it does look good once you have a build together in it, the case itself has awful airflow. This one looks like it probably has pretty bad airflow as well. This case has, again, a solid front panel. It's not going to have great airflow at all. And then this case, sort of same thing. Looks like it has bad airflow, and I don't want to choke off my graphics card and my CPU. So I'm going to move on and take a look at this DIY PC one, and we might have a winner here. Let's go ahead and open up this, and it looks like we definitely do. So we have a mesh front here. So this is going to be my case of choice, and you know, it's an okay case, and it only costs $24. So even if it's not great to build in, at least I'll have something here. Okay, now I actually just changed my mind like right after I said that I was gonna pick out that last case. The reason I changed my mind here is I'm not 100% sure if this drive sort of caddy or drive area is removable. It looks like it has some Phillips head screws there, so it very well might be that you can just remove this bracket. But in case it's not, I don't really wanna deal with taking an angle grinder to a brand new case. And I'm gonna spend a few more dollars on this Versa case because right now it's really, really cheap, and it provides this nice little drive bay here that's not gonna interfere at all with the graphics card area. Looks like it even has a little bit of space behind the motherboard tray there to do some cable management. So that's what I'm gonna go with instead. It's this Thermaltake Versa H15. It's a few dollars more, but it looks like it's gonna be a pretty good looking PC case anyways. And with the side panel on, it's got that. It does look like it has pretty good airflow there. So I think that's probably the right direction to go with it. And really the only negative that I have on this case, and you can always add one later, is it doesn't look like there's a fan up front. So you may at some point, if you put this PC together, if you notice thermals being less than ideal, you can always just wedge a fan up there. It looks like it probably has a mounting strip here for that, but even if it doesn't, you can always rig something up to make it fit in there because it does have that mesh front panel. It should have pretty solid airflow. Now for my power supply, this may or may not be a popular pick, and this is purely just a cost decision. But I've always had really good luck with these Corsair sort of cheaper power supplies. So I'm going to get this CX450. This is the 2017 version. It's 80 plus bronze certified, and with the rebate, it's $20. It has the connectors I need, both the 8-pin EPS as well as the PCIe connector in case I have a GPU that requires that. It's not modular at all, and that's, by the way, not it at all. And really, though, this illustrates the point. It does not have the ketchup and mustard cables whatsoever. It's all black cables, so it should look pretty solid in this build. Cable management won't be great because they're those sort of thick circular cables that have the not great sleeving on them. And I'll sort of show you what I mean here. Yeah, it has this obnoxious sleeving on it that I've never been a big fan of, but at least, again, once it's installed and in the system, it's gonna look just fine. Okay, so with only a GPU lacking, and also I'm gonna go ahead and add a manual part here, and that's going to be the OS. And I'm going to mark the OS as $10 because I know I can find a copy of Windows for $10 on eBay. So I'm just going to go ahead and add that in there. So with the OS, we have $388 spent, and we're going to be looking for a video card now. But before I look for the video card, I am going to revisit this particular CPU and see what I can do about it, because while I would love to have that Ryzen 16 or 2600 rather in there, I think I can do a little bit better with the pricing. Yeah, so I went ahead and swapped out that Ryzen 5 2600 for a Ryzen 5 1400 because the money that I saved there opens up just enough budget space at $357.38 here. I think I can probably fit an RX 570 in this particular build. Boom! There it is. I did find an RX 570 for $140. And the great thing right now about getting one of these RX 570s, 580s, those cards right now, you get 2 free games with that. And I'll go ahead and pull up the Newegg page because it lists the games that you get. You get either, actually you get to pick 2 of these, but you get The Division 2, Resident Evil 2, or Devil May Cry 5. You get to pick 2 of those 3 games. So that's a great sort of tack on value for the system because the system's gonna be able to run those games quite well. Now, of course, if you are somebody that just doesn't care about rebates or you just don't want to jump through the hoops, there are $70 worth of rebates in this build as it sits right now as of filming. Obviously, if you don't want to deal with those rebates, you're going to have to cut out some parts and drop your specs a little bit lower than that. You might not be able to fit that RX 570 in there, for instance. But what we have here is a quad-core 8-thread processor combined with 8 gigabytes of fairly fast DDR4 RAM. It's not spectacular, but it's fairly fast. And then you get a 1TB hard drive, which the first upgrade that I would do with this system is add a 120GB SSD just as a boot drive to make everything else snappy. You get an RX 570 card, which is going to be a phenomenal starting gamer card for 1080p gaming. And depending on what games you play, like if you play League of Legends, for example, you could run that at 1440p if you actually have the display for that. This does include the operating system. My last video, and I'm sure there will be a link at the end, if nothing else, possibly even a card here. My last video, though, was looking at this, actually this monitor here. It's the an Acer 144 Hertz 1080p FreeSync panel, which would play excellently with this RX 570, and it's not too expensive either. It's just $200 on Amazon for this particular 1080p gamer geared panel, though it's just a nice panel all around for the price. So without investing an arm and a leg, you could be up and running with a PC that can play high refresh rate games on a high refresh rate monitor with an adaptive sync technology. But that's gonna be it for me with this build. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about it. I'll go ahead and leave a link to this PC part picker list. Obviously, as parts fluctuate in pricing, this price may go up or down. Since I was picking some of the cheapest parts at their respective areas, like the motherboard, for instance, it's likely that in the future this price may actually fluctuate upwards a little bit. And if it does, what I would just do is look for parts that you can swap out for equivalent prices as actually shown in this particular video. But again, comments down below, let me know what you would change about this build. Maybe you would change up the price point that you're shooting for and go for like a $600 build and be able to fit that Ryzen 5 2600 in there, or maybe even one of those 8-core parts from AMD as well. But I would love to hear your suggestions for this build there. If you like the video, hey, give it a like, share, subscribe, comment, all those things. Social media down below, and of course, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.